Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a senior professional with a deep understanding of branding and personal branding from Sacramento, California, USA, Vanessa Errecarte. Vanessa, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's exciting to be here.
Thank
I
you.
really respect your body of work. Very
Thank
impressive.
Thank you very much. Vanessa is an author of a book titled Valuable and Visible: Redefining Personal Branding by Putting Impact Over Image. She teaches one of USA's only 4-credit MBA courses in personal branding at the UC Davis Graduate School of Management. And she's also an award-winning lecturer and a marketing consultant. So, Vanessa, we're going to speak about your book today, but before that, a few questions for you. You have built a career at the intersection of academia, consulting, and branding.
hmm
What were some of the defining moments in your journey that has shaped this path?
Defining moments in my journey. Well, I started noticing because I'm a millennial, cusp of Gen X and millennial.
Mhm.
And I started noticing that the world shifted probably about 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago.
Mm.
The world shifted, and instead of becoming a person that belonged to an organization, we all became people that belonged to ourselves and also various organizations.
Right.
And lines started becoming blurred. And that's not to say that people don't go work very long careers for organizations. The world is not made up of all entrepreneurs,
Yeah,
but you've probably noticed this yourself. So much fluidity in the world.
correct.
And there are some people and organizations who seem to take advantage of that better than others. And I started noticing a lot of patterns between what humans that were succeeding in this new fluid world were doing. And it was actually very similar to what the best corporate brands do so
Mhm.
that they stay relevant. And so I started creating these ideas of what if we taught the human to be a little more like that customer serving corporation
Mhm.
as they move through the world?
Mhm.
I also had a moment, and I think the most defining moment for me, and we all have these personal moments, right? But my daughter was 3 years old at the time. She's 11 now, and my son was 1. And we discovered that she had a very rare orthopedic condition.
Mhm.
Only 1 in 10,000 kids have it. And she was going to have to wear a series of body casts for a year to a year and a half to fix it.
Mhm.
Every 3 months, she would have to go under anesthesia and wear these casts. And as a mother, I started thinking, geez, like, I want to feel her heartbeat. I want to feel her against me. What's this going to be like? I started wondering, what are people going to say? Because this was a very rare form of scoliosis, really. So it wasn't like she was sick, and I wanted to empower her. And I was always taught in school, and I think you were too, that business and personal are different. And
Absolutely.
so I was always afraid to get personal. But I knew in that moment I needed to use my skills on social platforms to say to our community, hey, if you see her and she's in this cast, tell her it's her superhero shield.
Mhm.
I want to empower her. She was too important for me to keep it separate anymore.
Mhm.
And so that taught me too how much I like teaching and mentoring others. I noticed when I let that little bit of personal in, people started coming to me with their own struggles, and I was able to help them through based on my experiences as well. And so that really sent me more on this path toward wanting to teach and train people, organizations, et cetera. And that's a bit of who I am in the intersection. So I always tell people my personal brand happened on accident, and I'm going to teach yours on purpose.
Fascinating. Great response. Thank you for sharing this. Vanessa, over 2 decades of working with professionals and organizations,
Mhm.
what is the most common misconception you have noticed that people have about their own value?
Yeah. I think that one of the most common misconceptions people have about their own value is that it will become more valuable at a certain moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so this notion that value needs to be fostered and grown before you can go do something.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to flip that on its head, because let's say you know something really special right now. Sure, you can get 5 more degrees and 30 more years of experience.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at something in a different way right now, if you learned how to do something that is a little better than how other people do it,
Mm-hmm.
you could already be helping people.
Right.
Coca-Cola, they were a tonic when they first launched.
Yeah.
They didn't wait for Coke Zero. They didn't predict Coke Zero.
Mm-hmm.
Disney was a little mouse, right? In someone's head, in Walt Disney's head. And so we tend to wait. We tend to think that we need to cultivate value.
Mm-hmm.
And we forget that we already have a certain amount of value to share that exists. And this is so opposite of, how most brands, corporate or personal, start. They start where they're at.
Well said. Let's come to your book, Valuable and Visible, Redefining Personal Branding by Putting Impact Over Image. And my first question for you, Vanessa, is that the title Valuable and Visible suggests a balance. Why
Yes.
is the tension between value and visibility so critical today?
Yeah. Well, because sometimes I find that the people that are the most valuable cringe at being visible.
Correct.
A lot, we see value as something to be given. And I have a disclaimer in my personal branding class: no TikTok dancing required, none of that, right? But interesting you talk about my title and the tension in my title, because I first thought visible and valuable sounded better. I thought it rolled off my tongue better. And then I had to change it to valuable and visible,
Mm.
because it's the visibility that follows the value
Correct.
naturally, right?
Correct.
So I had to do that. But you're right in that there is a tension, because personal branding has become something that's very performative and algorithm based.
Mm.
When people think of personal branding, they think of the influencer. The influencer is actually an industry. The influencer is a human who um, creates every single day, usually on a full-time basis, even if they don't act like it, and uses different types of techniques to try to go as viral as possible.
Mm.
And they have to keep that up every single day to maintain visibility, because most of the time that virality is based on in general lifestyle and humor,
Mm.
and overcoming certain general obstacles that many humans have, right? And so it's almost like you're putting this reality TV show on that needs to be 24/7. That's an influencer. And the goal of being an influencer is to trade money for posts.
Mm.
That's a job. Now, let's say, let's go back to the personal brand. The personal brand is a vehicle to communicate our value.
Mm-hmm.
So brands have always been about value. If I have a product here, I have, chapstick right here. I don't need to put a brand on it. It is what it is. It's the
Mm.
product, but the brand helps me say, we care. This brand cares that, when you're feeling dehydrated, you're at least comfortable. You at least don't feel like your lips are going to crack or something like that. What is the brand doing for you?
Mm.
So Vaseline right here
Mm.
is helping me, as winter turns to spring, feel more comfortable,
Right.
right? It's all about me, the consumer, what the brand's trying to communicate.
Mm.
Yet when we think about a personal brand, we flip that and we say it's all about us. We have to figure out exactly what makes us who we are. We have to live a certain persona. We have to practice a certain presence.
Mm.
But really, what our brand is the value we give to others. So one thing I want to tell you is we all sound boring and the same
Mm.
when we just spout off what we need to be good at in our industry,
Mm.
right? But if we can find a different point of view
Mm-hmm.
and say, actually, usually a product manager does this, but I do it this way because this is why we lose sight of this problem when we do it the common way,
Mm.
then all of a sudden you've given value to people who need it,
Absolutely.
right? Now, none of that was about you,
Mm.
but I'm so curious about that person now. That person made me see something in a whole different way. So all of a sudden, I go seek them out. And then
Mm.
I realized, oh, they have these degrees, they
Mm.
have these awards, they are who they say they are. I need to listen to them more. Maybe I need to hire them. Maybe I need them to consult with me. But you've never had to promote yourself. So these are two different things. And in a corporate organization, we would never dream about making the brand all about the corporation.
Mm.
It really is about the relationship. But again, the personal brand gets confused with the influencer.
Very well said. What does putting impact over image actually mean
Mm-hmm.
in
Mm-hmm.
practical everyday professional life? And give me an example if possible.
Yeah. So it means leading again with that value. So I think a lot of people, we're so heavily trained in professional settings, in corporate trainings, in
Mm.
business schools. We're so heavily trained with, you've heard phrases like the 3 minute me, the elevator pitch,
Mm.
always be ready to network, always be ready with, these 5 different one-liners to say who you are. And we lose sight of the fact that impact is an exchange of ideas,
Mm.
impact is an exchange of help.
Yeah.
And so we're so busy presenting our own persona and trying to communicate that thing to someone else that we want them to hear about
Mm.
us,
Mm.
but it ends up falling on them pretty meaninglessly.
Yeah.
And so, the image that is what is so image based, even though that isn't totally about image, but what you're doing there is you're working on,
Mm.
describing basically the image that you want that person to know you have, right? Your holistic image.
Mm.
But when you flip it and you talk about the impact, like I just said, with the tension, with valuable and visible, that image follows because
Mm.
they seek it out. I don't know the last time you purchased a vehicle, but I knew what vehicle I wanted.
Mhm.
And I knew I wanted it for 3 different reasons. And those were my leading reasons. And then I drove it and it confirmed that I
Mm.
wanted it. And then finally, like right before I signed on the bottom line, I took the window sticker out of the plastic
Mm.
just to make sure I was getting all the specs I thought I was getting, but I already wanted it. I
Right.
just went and I verified everything that I thought was already true about the car, which is then where that image comes. So it's not that you entirely put aside or forget about people knowing who you are.
Mm.
It's just that it comes so naturally. It's that pull effect. We go for that pull effect in marketing. Before we want it, we want that customer to know we want it. It's too crowded of a world to just do the push marketing in your face. I hope you buy.
Well
We
said.
want that for ourselves.
Correct. Correct. And therefore, a follow-up question for you, Vanessa. How can individuals identify and articulate their true value in a way that is both authentic and compelling?
Yeah. And this is such an important question because in the last few years, it's changed so much. So AI has made us, as you know, all sound the same.
Correct.
And I'm personally worried that we're going to have a world of sameness in a few
Mm.
years.
Mm.
And so sounding distinctive is number one important to rise above the noise, but it also is what has always made people lean forward and listen closer or slow down their scroll.
Yeah.
And so what I always tell people is you have a distinctive point of view inside you. You just may not know how to form it.
Mm.
And so, 2 questions I start people with. I have a 5-step framework that works pretty well.
Mm.
But 2 things that I have people say is here's what everybody thinks, here's what I want you to know. So, those are 2 things immediately that make you stand out. And it can be very simple.
Right.
So, Tony Robbins, the famous motivational speaker,
Yeah.
there's a quote from him that I use as an example a lot. He said, at one point, one of the things he said was, knowledge is not power. Knowledge is potential power. Action is power.
Absolutely.
Now, he's still kind of talking about how knowledge is power. It's just we're framing it in the wrong way, and unless we take action, the knowledge just sits there, right? So basically, he's saying, here's what you think you know, that knowledge is power. He's touching on that.
Yeah.
And then he's saying, here's what I want you to know. And so, what I tell my students to do is first identify the common trope of something in your industry, something that you know, or the common belief, right?
Mm.
Next step, ask yourself, what's the real problem? So let's say that, I need to hang a picture. And so I need to buy a hammer and nails. The real problem is that maybe not that I can't find my hammer and nail, so I need to buy a new one, right? Maybe that's not my real problem. Maybe if we think about it a little more, my real problem is I want a little more warmth and happiness in my house. And so I want to hang up a picture of my family,
Yeah.
right? What's that reason behind that hammer and nails, right? So go upstream, find that real problem, and then give your understanding of a better solution. Maybe that person doesn't know that they need to go buy that there's other options rather than going and buying another hammer and nail that's going to sit around until they get around to hanging the photo. Maybe they need to know that there's like people in their area that will come and do this, and they can buy a subscription, and so many times a year they will come refresh whatever they need done in their house, right? So first you're identifying the common problem that we assume, then the real problem. By going upstream, then you're saying you have a better understanding. Here's all the other ways I look at this. Then you have to provide evidence. So evidence is, you have to prove it. So testimonials, experience, or research. And then finally, that last step is tell people how to act. If you tried this for a certain amount of time, you know, what would happen? Your life would improve, right? For, try this for a few days, like changing any habit, eating habits, whatever it is you're talking to people about and giving your counterintuitive point of view, have them try it. And this is where it gets interesting, because you're having a conversation and now you're speaking in this distinctive way. And all of a sudden someone does go and they try it, and maybe it helps them. Now, not only do they remember you as being distinctive, but you have trust. And now they start telling people about you. And so you travel. Conversation doesn't die right there. They don't forget where you went and got your degree and all your awards, right? They remember you because they've passed you along, and other people now remember you as well.
Well said. How should organizations think about personal branding for their employees? Should they encourage it or control it?
Okay. This is interesting. I was just thinking about this week, because something I often say so much is that there is a point in every professional's life. And I just touched on it at the beginning of our interview when I said we all started kind of becoming these humans that needed points of view. And when we move up in our careers, like think about early on, every advancement you made was based on being good at a task.
Correct.
You were so good at it, so practiced at it, maybe a little better than everyone else. You moved up. All of a sudden, you get to this first place of leadership. And now you're not expected to just be good at tasks, but you're expected to have these distinct opinions and be compelling and rally everybody behind you. And so a perfect example of this that I was thinking about just this week is the Artemis too. We just sent these 4 Gen X, late 40s, like of my age. We just sent these people to the moon, right? And these people have been astronauts for like circa 20, 30 years, 20, 25 years probably. And they've been really good at what they've done to get to where they're at. And then all those compelling quotes that came from them, all of a sudden they were speaking to us on a regular basis, and it was such a fast pivot. Now, they all certainly had these feel-good personal brands, amplified by those quotes, but so did NASA. When we're all individually sharing our points of view in that memorable way that's compelling, like when Christina Koch said, no, actually, Earth, you're a crew. We're not just the crew, you're a crew, right? That's so compelling because she's saying so many things in that statement in this counterintuitive way, like, this is the team. This is like the perspective I have from here. I wish you could have that perspective and think of yourself as a team. She said so many things in that one statement and made us think. And so imagine if every corporation, instead of just putting a bio and a photo of each employee, what if they had an active page where they could share some of these distinctive points of views? What if they could, give opinions on a project they've just completed and how they did it a bit differently? That's only going to help the company too.
Very interesting. Vanessa, I have time for 2 more questions. It's often said that introverts find it difficult to build their personal brand. And I've often been asked the same question. So my question to you is, how can introverts or quiet professionals build a strong personal brand without adopting extroverted behaviors?
Yeah, such a good question. And in fact, in the introduction of my book, and I debated, should I keep this in or take it out? I
Mm,
write that this book is a love letter to the hesitant,
mm,
and I kept it in. And it is. It's a different point of view for someone who is hesitant or introverted. I consider myself an extrovert, but I'm still very hesitant about putting myself out there. I work in marketing because I like putting other people and organizations out there,
mm,
right?
mm, mm,
And so, the way I wish people thought about personal branding is that idea. It starts with that idea and that conversation.
right.
Every single brand has started that way.
Yeah.
The most introverted people enjoy
Mm,
one-on-one simple conversations. We just don't usually take those kinds of things online because we think they're boring.
mm,
But in the age of AI, I argue that that authenticity, turning your phone, putting it on a stack of books, saying, here's the 3 steps I take to do this a little bit differently. What do you think?
mm,
Do that once a week.
mm,
We all have a plan for how we're going to show up in person. We plan it out. We don't do that each week online. Take your own interesting ideas, your own conversations, and just bring them online and view it as nothing but that.
yeah.
And that's where the service first part that I talk about in my book comes in, because as you help people, again, you gain that trust, your
Mm,
ideas travel, and you're not doing any self promotion. It's
mm,
coming naturally.
mm,
And I can't think of a situation that I can label as personal branding that maybe an introvert would enjoy more. Right. I mean, I think this is as close as we can
yeah.
get to a
Yeah.
system that can make most people feel comfortable, even people like me who, geez, I love to go get my energy from a group of people after I've had a tiring week. But the last thing I want to do is, imagine so many eyes on me and trying to be performative online.
Amazing. Great response. And my last question for you, Vanessa. Uh, if my viewers and listeners could take away one actionable principle from your book,
Mhm.
Valuable and Visible, what would it be?
I think the most actionable principle that I would like people to take away is start now.
Mm,
But I don't want to give you something that general because I want there to be something that's really, really useful. So here's what else I want to say. And I think it's especially important right now with AI.
mm,
Question the question.
mhm,
Anytime you sit and start prompting and say, write about this for me, or anytime you start telling people something naturally, like, hey, I do this way, stop and think, here's what I know,
mm,
here's what I want people to know, or
mm,
here's what everybody thinks, here's what I want to think them to think, here's how I do it differently. It's amazing if you start practicing that, how compelling you'll start to sound,
mm.
and you might even get a little bit excited about sharing it further.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Well said. And on that note, and your amazing piece of advice, which is start now and question the question. Thank you, Vanessa, for speaking to me about your own amazing journey. We covered some very interesting ground on branding and personal branding, and I love the way you uh, give the example of Artemis 2 and how they have brought together such amazing visibility and knowledge for a much larger uh, people group of people who've been watching them. Thank you for speaking to me
Mhm.
about personal branding, about your book, and all the very best to you.
You too. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.